Welcome back to Game Changers. Our first guest is helping people find true, meaningful, and authentic connections. Joining us now is Isa Watson, CEO of Squad.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan and Corey.
Thanks so much for dropping by. So I've been doing a little browsing of the internet and I saw that Squad was recognized by Inc. magazine in 2017. How did that happen?
We were an Inc. 30 under 30 company. So right like 60 days before I turned 30, they hit us up and they were like, we really love what you're doing. We got interviewed by the editors and we were selected as one of their top 30 companies of that year.
All right, let's go back a little bit to just really tell our viewers what Squad is, how they can grow their squad, and what this really means for authentically connecting with others.
Yeah, so one of the big gaps that we find in the world today of technology is that you're able to facilitate online communication. You know, you have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have Instagram, but what about, you know, the ability to take those online connections offline at scale? And so that was what Squad essentially is and does. And so you can imagine as a central repository for all events and activities going on across your different communities. And so to your point, Corey, of how can people use this, we actually started out in the workplaces. So workplaces, you know, just work in general, they were just having a hard time cultivating community at work. And with millennials, it's just much more important to cultivate that community for them to feel connected. And so we started off with companies like Walmart.com and SeatGeek and Carbon 3D. And what happened is we actually enabled the ability for people to create communities, not just work communities, but outside. So you have, you know, non-work communities like your wellness communities, fitness communities, your apartment building communities, whatever the case is, and that's that central place that you can access all events and activities going on across your communities.
Amazing. So just like a ton of startups, you received some VC funding. What was that process like? I heard it can be very strenuous, and of course you have to give a little bit of equity to sometimes the funders. So What was that like?
The process was tricky. It's not normal and natural to anyone who hasn't done it a ton of times. And so I would say that it was a very long ramp up, meaning it took us a few years to raise $500,000, and it took us like a month to be offered $6 million. Wow. We've raised a total of about $3.5 million in VC funding, and you know, I would say that it's almost straight hustle with a combination of storytelling and a little bit of luck of getting in front of the right people at the right time. The funny thing about it is that the guy who led our round is at a company called Harrison Metal. So they were the first institutional investors in companies like Birchbox and Harry's and Heroku. And when he first heard about us, he passed on us the first time. And then 2 months later, he heard about us and he was like, oh, this sounds awesome. And sometimes it happens like that and you can't really control it. There's no logic in the process, but Michael Daring has been such a fantastic partner to us. And so on the other side, it's great, but then we have the next round, so we'll see.
Oh, congrats. Y'all are doing some awesome stuff.
Well, they are actually doing amazing things because not only have you guys raised several $1 million in funding, you guys have Squad able to connect people all across the country, not just in your office, as you mentioned, where you guys started out. Can you talk about that some?
Yeah, so the way that the platform is structured is that you have, if you're familiar with Slack, right? You have a community, which is kind of like your workspace in Slack. And then you have squads in those communities, which are like your channels in Slack, right? And so across your different communities, you have the ability to have different squads. A number of the communities do have a region association, but there are some communities that don't have a region associated. But again, kind of with the goal of driving online connections offline at scale, that's where kind of like the region plays into it. But we do see people part of the same communities that aren't necessarily in the same place, and just kind of cultivating connections that way.
Amazing. Well, Corey's a part of my squad, and now you're part of my squad.
Isa's part of my squad as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, you're killing it. Well, thank you so much, Isa Watson from Squad. We really appreciate you coming out today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, and coming up next, we are diving into the marketplace for buying and selling content at scale. You don't want to miss it. Stick around. More Culture Bank's Game Changers coming up.